Hey everyone. So I just wanted to start by, I don't know if everyone quite realizes, but Grit, this may be the last year that Grit is running this camp. We asked him last... Oh, maybe that's premature, but if, just in case it is, I just wanted to make everyone aware that what Grit has created over the last 5 years, like this Bang Bang within Burning Man has been defined by the community and the friends and, you know, all the people that come through have some connection, and Grit over the last 5 years after Rachel, you know, created that and kept that going. So it's now, what, 10 years? 10 years this year. So I think we just all like... I'm hearing Grit's story, and you'll probably hear Stacy's story, but these stories are just unbelievable. I was just, you know, I didn't know all that about Grit, and it's just amazing that he's able to sit down and share that with everyone. So thank you, Grit, for opening yourself up. It's amazing. We asked Grit last night whether he'd like say something, and that's what came out, and that's what, you know, was important. It's just unbelievable to hear where you've come from. So the theme of Burning Man this year was Metamorphosis, and it's a really great example. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey a little bit. So I'm a neurosurgeon. I've had the chance to pursue what was initially just a wild ambition, and I was able to pitch randomly, which I'll tell you a little bit about, to this guy in America who I cold called and sold him this crazy idea, and have spent the last 8 years building this chip that goes into the brain that basically connects your brain to a computer to turn your brain into a mouse and a keyboard, to let people with paralysis command things through a digital mechanism. So we're building a platform that enables the brain to turn into a mouse, keyboard, and then overcome speech problems, upper limb problems, and lower limb problems. So 8 years in, and last week after 8 years, and we've scrapped together $20 million. We've put together the first implant, and the first guy was implanted just last week. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my own journey, talk about how that came across, but more importantly, I want to talk a little bit about the theme of metamorphosis. And we're going to frame a concept about metamorphosis because that's the theme of the camp, and then we're going to split into sections, and Stacey's going to lead a little bit of a construct about how we think about ourselves changing. So just firstly on Burning Man, I think, I don't know all of your journeys, but it seems to be the case that to come to Burning Man, you need to be at a particular space in your life. You need to have enough freedom, resources, energy, the right age, and an open mind to explore and see what could come in your life. And for me, I've been here this is my third year at Bang Bang. It's presented an opportunity to step outside yourself a little bit and gain some perspective. So Stephanie and I have been digesting a book by a philosopher called Nietzsche. And this was written about 100 years ago. This is a guy who is pretty widely regarded as one of the most flexible and probably ambiguous philosophers, but pretty profound. He was characterized as a nihilist, and he called the end of religion, said God was dead, but he then moved forward and tried to categorize a way forward using humanistic and realistic fundamental concepps. So I'm going to present to you guys a chapter that I randomly got sent in my email from this Medium waitlist I'm on like a couple of weeks ago, and it was about metamorphosis. So I thought I'd present to you guys a framework on Nietzsche's Metamorphosis, talk about where I sat in that place, and then we're going to all use that as a framework to discuss and use as a construct for how lives can be evolving. Okay, so the concept is that there are 3 stages of spiritual metamorphosis through your life. And they're the camel, the lion, and then the child. Okay, so we're going to work through every one of these. The camel is the first stage, and it requires a metamorphosis. It's not necessarily a gift. You have to find that. The camel is that first stage, and it might be the stage in your life that is, it could be romantic, it could be work, it could be family, but it's some part of your ego that is working towards a goal. Okay? So the camel is the sturdy, hardy, desert-ready animal that's going to work its way through. It might be the first goal or ambition that you've taken, and you've stuck to it, and you've decided that's the thing you're going to do. That's what's important. That's what the world's telling me to do. I'm going to work at it. I'm going to make that useful. I'm going to make it happen. And the world might have said that's what's important. And so you're going down that pathway. Honest, naive, burdensome, lonely, grueling, maybe a rite of passage, a well-worn pathway, understood by the herd. Okay, the camels carry the greatest weight and they survive in the desert, but the weight is a burden, and with that time comes bitterness, despair, and the spirit of revenge. Unless you've nailed it the first time, which is very unlikely. Okay, so the camel's trudging along, you've chosen your path, and then you get into a really lonely part of the desert. And at that point, at the loneliest part, that's when you arrive at the second metamorphosis. Your spirit then becomes a lion. The lion is the energy that's needed to break out into that second metamorphosis, and it captures freedom, the lord of its own desert. During a period of disarray and actualization, why would you feed on the grass of the knowledge, but suffer the hunger of your soul? And what is the heaviest thing, you hero? Ask the load, bearing the spirit that you may take it upon yourself and rejoice in your strength. So what is the lion? The lion is the point at which you muster up the strength to say, no, actually, this is not my pathway. This has been a pathway that I've thought was important, and actually, the world is telling me that this is what's important, but there's another pathway for me. That's the lion. Now, the lion requires strength, it requires fight, and you have to encounter the dragon, okay? The dragon is the world telling you, this is what you should do. Don't fuck around, stick with the camel, stick with your pathway, you're on the right track, you're doing what's needed, don't be a fucking idiot. And the dragon says, no, do what you need to do. In this moment, the individual realizes that there is nothing to forbid them from creating their own values. You impose your will onto the world, but societal norms, your culture, your religion, your family, they all impress on you what you really should do. To flourish, the lion must defeat the law. I've got a few notes here, I couldn't remember all this. All the values have already been created, and I represent them, there will be no more. I will, thus speaketh the dragon. This is what you should do. And so for the dutiful, reverent, load-bearing spirit, the camel, it's a most formidable assumption to create freedom and to create new values. This requires the work of a beast. That's the lion. That's the second metamorphosis. His third metamorphosis, you don't want to fight your whole life, okay? The world is telling you how you should be. It's a constant battle. You're fighting it. At some point, you want to emerge into another space where you become a child. There's no happiness in fighting the dragons for all of one's life. To complete the third metamorphosis, you must become a child and rediscover the seriousness of play. The child is the innocence and forgetting of a new beginning, a sport, a self-propelling wheel, a sacred yes. The lion becomes the child when the individual who says, I will, not against you should, and affirms instead for the spirit of creation. Life is no longer a struggle to defeat other forces. Life is a celebration of one's powers, a sustained act of pure affirmation. Naivety, freedom, space, creativity. The child knows the joy of life and the innocence of perpetual creation. And creation is the deepest form of the human being. It requires innocence, it requires space. So the lion creates the space to say no to duty. The child creates new values into the space of freedom. Okay, so the camel, the lion, and then the child. For me, I was floating along in medicine. I was only really interested in the brain, how the brain was working. And I got to a point, having a bad relationship, went on for a long time. That was not going well, and I took a year off, and I went traveling for a year. And I reached out to the world. And towards the end of my year, I started cold calling people, and I'd been reading about this space about brain-computer interfaces. And it was this concept that you could put a chip in the brain to bypass any other part of the body that wasn't working. Your brain sends a signal from your brainstem, spinal cord, muscles, peripheral nerves, skin, and then fingers or hands, and you move stuff. Not until I'm sure there are people in the room who know people in your family or friends who have been afflicted by paralysis, stroke, spinal cord injury, multiple sclerosis, a whole bunch of conditions, anything that stops your hands from working, but your brain is still working and you know what to do. And so I had been reading about this space, this is 12 years ago, and I had this idea that you didn't need to put a hole in the skull to get into the brain to get that signal out. You could do it from inside the blood vessels. And so I guess my camel into lion moment was putting out into the world that I had this idea that was a little bit out there and crazy. And I reached out to someone, a complete cold call. They gave me a chance. I turned up in America with my backpack, presented this concept, and there was enough of an interest. And even though it sounded ridiculous when I presented to him, he said, you know, do this, 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 and we'll give you the first $1 million to start putting that project together. And it's been 7 years since that time, and we've scrounged together a lot of funds needed to get to that point. Putting a medical device in a body is a huge safety concern, and we finally figured out a way to do it safely. And just last week, for the first time, I want to tell you about who this first patient was. So when the first cardiac pacemakers went into the heart, this is 30 years ago, the first guy that had it done, it didn't work. He had it replaced 80 times. 80. His heart wasn't working. He kept coming back. They kept taking out the lead, putting it back, and he was willing to be that almost guinea pig to, you know, and now pacemakers have become the archetypal type of medical device, right? A pacemaker is, they put a needle in your chest, go down to your heart, drop a lead in your vein near the heart, and then send data in or out, and they recognize whether the heart's working or not. So we've now done the first thing for the first time, but we're going up into the brain. We put a lead up into the brain. We put it near the part of the brain. When you move your hand, it fires. It can record that activity, and we're turning that into a platform, like a set of apps that are brain-controlled apps that then turn that signal into a mouse or a keyboard to then control things that enable you to text digitally. So you're able to create text messages without having to move a muscle. So hands-free texting, like a pacemaker technology. And so we built that platform, but we haven't been able to test that until the first human arrives. And so we screened 120 patients after we'd proven that it was safe as best as we could. Still a huge amount of risk. And then last week, this first patient, I won't say his name, but we'll call him Bruce. And so Bruce said, Bruce has motor neuron disease, or ALS, and that means that his nerve cells start dying. He's got about 3 or 5 years to live, and his arms have stopped working. Now, there are a whole bunch of trials you can do that try to give you a couple more months of life, and he said, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be a part of something that's going to increase the quality of life. And he had been a guy who was, I think he was a veteran. He'd been involved in the Australian Army, and he was communicating with his community across he's in the country, but across the state. And he had lost the ability to email. And so his arms couldn't work, so he was dangling over a keyboard trying to hit the buttons. It was taking us 3 days to write an email. So he said, what I care about is staying in contact with my community and making a contribution. That's what's important to me. So he saw this technology, this hands-free texting technology is what he wanted to do. And we said, this is the first time. It may not work. It's probably going to break. And he was still willing to, give it a shot. So as we're leading up to the surgery, which was last week, I've been so intensely stressed. Anyway, so with no guarantee that it's going to work and the risk that something's going to go wrong, there's blood clots going to form in the brain, he's going to have a stroke, he was still willing to just go for it and, be that guy. It was just amazing. So we do the surgery last week, it goes up into his brain, we do the scan afterwards, and it's like sitting in his brain, he's the first guy. So the anaesthetist trying to wake him up after the surgery, pulls out the breathing tube and he's like coughing and splattering and waking up. And the anaesthetist says to him, "Bruce, you did it, congratulations." And the first thing he says is, "No, you guys did it, congratulations." And it was just like, we all started crying, it was unbelievable. So I then came to Burning Man and my whole team are now trying to figure out whether it's going to work. I don't have phone reception, I have no idea what's happening. So we'll see what happens. But what's amazing about this space, this idea of this brain-computer interface, we started this 8 years ago and it was a pipe dream. And then Elon Musk launches his company 2 years ago, and suddenly everyone in Silicon Valley is going crazy over this concept, and it's gone from a science fiction story to something real. And so it's just being in the right time, the right place, taking a risk, throwing out to the world, and then getting your chance to go against the grain a little bit. It was sort of my camel to lion story. So I think that's enough about that. I guess what we're going to do now is, by the way, I don't feel like I've quite got to the child state, that ability to let go of all that energy and stuff that makes you angry and just to be in a zen state. I feel like Annie and I and Stephanie had a great chat the other night, and there are a few people here who have probably gone through those levels where they've got to the point where you're kind of, a little bit enlightened. That sounds annoying, but a little bit light and open and willing to talk about everything and not have it all pent up. That's a really amazing space to work towards. And it might not be your whole person, it might be parts of yourself, but I think that's the goal of Metamorphosis, and that was the plan this year. So I think at that point Stacey's going to take us through a little group session about maybe identifying where you're at with certain things, and yeah, I'll hand it over to Stacey. Thanks, guys.
Epic stuff. Thank you, sir. How about we all spend a little 5 seconds to send a prayer to Bruce, huh? Just maybe bow your head and have a little thought about that pioneer. Send a little love to that guy really willing to risk it all for the benefit of many, many people to come. Thanks for your work, Tom. So next what we're going to do is embrace that concept of the camel, the lion, and the child. And I want you to get into groups of 3. So it doesn't matter who you're sitting with. Maybe someone you don't know. That might be a more interesting process. Find 2 people next to you, create a little group of 3, and do that. So for this little process, what we're going to do is 1 minute per person. We're going to go around each and just explore in your own life and really open up and listen to the people that are in the group here. At which phase are you in your life? Do you feel as though you're following the norm? And there are some people that come to Burning Man to break out of that matrix box, Have you been a good kid? You did well at school, you did well at uni, you got a nice degree, you went on, you got a nice job, and now you're doing the camel thing. And you're churning and you're making money and you're doing your stuff and people are telling you what to do and you're getting the gold star and everything's great. Are you a camel? If that's you, there's nothing wrong with that, that's cool. Everybody goes through that phase. Or have you at some point gone, you know what, fuck that. I'm not going to sit in a box and push buttons that does negative shit in the other end of that matrix life. Have you broken out and have you become a lion and are you fighting for something? Have you found what that is for you? And you're like, you know what, I don't care what it takes, but I'm going to push and I'm going to create something and I'm going to make a difference. If that's where you are, then let's share that. So are you at camel phase? Are you at lion phase? Or perhaps you've done a couple of lion rounds and you've got a couple of cool things under your belt and no longer do you need to scream and yell to get attention. And it's more for you about sitting back and being like, hey guys, how can I help? Who's at lion? Who's at camel? Who needs to break through those phases? So have a share with your people. I'm going to use a timer. I'm always into timing. We're going to have 1 minute per person. The child phase, for me, I mean, Tom can explain it differently, but for me, we had a good chat about this yesterday, a very open-minded, open-hearted chat about this. For me, I interpret the child phase as somebody who has succeeded in their own way and have now turned back and being like, how can I share my wisdom? How can I be humble? How can I support others? How can I gift, and how can I not just be of service, but how can I help others? How can I help lift others? And there's nothing, no right or wrong. Everybody comes there for their own reason. Everyone's on their own journey. So have it share with your people. I'm going to do a timer. I'm going to say 10 seconds to go. So you wrap up your story, and then it's the next person's turn. Does that make sense? Any questions? Are you a camel, a lion, or a child? No right or wrong. Don't try and be a hero. In fact, it's better to be totally honest, because if you're at camel, there could be a lion or a child sitting next to you who can help you get through that phase. All right, 1 minute per person. Ready, steady, and go. Who's going first? Pick someone to go first. All right, ladies and gentlemen, wrap it up. Hey, for anybody who facilitates workshops or events or does some speaking, two great things that I've learned over many years of doing this kind of stuff. The shh is by far the best way to quiet a crowd. That nothing works better than a shush. And number two, if you start telling your story and you get a bit emotional like Mr. Oxley, which makes complete sense, a deep breath can calm those nerves and bring you back to normal. Thank you for your participation, guys. Maybe a little handheld or a hug to reconnect with your group that you shared with would be a nice process. Or jump on top of each other. Whatever makes more sense here today. Fantastic. Right, next up we have Mr. Mason coming all the way from Manly, Australia. He has a degree in clinical psychology, was it? Behavioral psychology. He's going to give us an insight in how to get through those moments of going from the camel to the lion. And I'm sure there's some people here who feel like stepping up in a lion kind of way. So this man's going to give us some ways of physically dealing with that resistance that comes up. Mr. Mason, enjoy.
Thank you, Tom, for that beautiful speech, for actually being able to verbalize the camel, the lion, and the baby, the child, being able to actually make that tangible. Because that's a hard thing to what your transition in life is, and be able to actually label that as something. So it's a beautiful way to do it. So I was lucky enough to study behavioural psychology when I was growing up as a kid, but I think, it's Jungian and Freudian psychology, and I think it's flawed for a lot of reasons. I mean, everyone's got fucked up upbringings, right? Grit, what he's achieved, I mean, that's fucking mind-blowing, incredible, man. I didn't know your story. That was beautiful. And look at what you've created. You've created all of this, right? So I think too much of psychology... Well done for leading that. So there's three different types of psychology. One of them's evolutionary, and that's based on how we were, if you believe in evolution, how we were monkeys and we grew up and how we are. There's behavioural, which is the dominant side, which is, your upbringing, your beliefs, how that affects your world. Then there's applied psychology, which deals with the here and now, and that's the thing that I find most interesting. And that's what I'm going to be talking about a lot today. And I think with Metamorphosis, it's about change, right? And change isn't easy. It takes balls. How do you go from the camel to the lion to the baby? I think you actually need techniques. Unless you're a fucking genius, and, how do you actually make that transition? You might know why you're doing what you're doing, but how you get there, fuck. Who has a crystal ball? So I was lucky enough to grow up with a beautiful family. My dad was an advertising executive. Mum was a naturopath, homeopath, spiritual healer. Apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. And Mum was saving lives, right? and Dad was earning a good income, and he provided a middle class upbringing. It meant that I could have a surfboard as a kid, which is important. It's a huge part of my life. But we could have never survived on Mum's income. And how fucked is that the person that's making the world a better place is, actually can't actually provide for the family, and we needed that advertising money coming in. So I went to uni to study psychology to then go into marketing, because I realised I wasn't going to be that practitioner. I'm not that beautiful human being that can actually save lives and make the world a better place. But maybe I can help those people that are doing it do more of it through marketing them, through helping them out. So that's why I chose what I did. But I did that for 10 years, and my metamorphosis was being in corporate advertising and, sucking the corporate dick and, like stakeholders rule and ethics rule. And, you kind of got to cut your teeth, but it's fucked at the same time, right? So I started my own business, Pineapple Marketing, 4 years ago, and went on a mission to try and help good people do more of it. I nearly set myself broke doing that, because a lot of naturopaths and that type of thing actually just only are focused on making the world a better place. And I realised, actually, most people are held back by fear and anxiety. And we're going to do a little group meditation together towards the end of this talk, which I'm going to try a technique to help get rid of anxiety and fear. Because I think that's the hardest thing, right? You want to make the change, but then actually making that change is anxious, right? It creates fear and anxiety. And a lot of people feel that fear. For me personally, I feel it in my solar plexus. Some people feel it in their stomach, some in their shoulder, their head, wherever, right? And that fear can be the thing that stops you transitioning into the lion. I think most people here probably don't have that, but I think there's a lot of people out there that, they can't push through that fear. And can you imagine if we lived in a world without fear, how beautiful that would be? And I think at Burning Man we have that. You can imagine the whole world was like that. So there's this little technique. After 5 years in working in marketing, I spent a lot of time studying applied psychology. And that's the idea of, applying psychology, the here and the now. And actually our minds are so powerful. So I want everyone to do like a little group meditation together. To shut your eyes or keep your eyes open. For most people it works better if you shut your eyes. And you don't have to do this, it might be a little bit difficult, but I want you to think of something that makes you a little bit anxious. It could be telling your girlfriend you love them. It could be asking your boss for a pay rise. It could be anything, right? Just, it's a little bit hard, but just sort of channel that anxiety, right? And if anyone wants to tell me where they feel that would be beautiful. Stomach, solar plexus, shoulders. Okay, cool. And does that have a shape or a colour? Can you visualise sort of what that anxiety looks like? It's a what? It's a pole. Okay. And that pole, are you able to maybe spin that pole at all? Or could you change its colour? What colour is your pole? Silver. Could you change it into white or yellow or pink or red? Or what's your favourite colour? Purple. Could you make that pole purple? Okay, so you're able to control anxiety because she feels anxiety as a white pole in her left shoulder. She's just able to change that to a purple pole. So wherever you're feeling that, I want you to imagine that running down your shoulder, down your arm, and slowly running out of your body, like out down your left arm, your right arm, it doesn't matter, out of the top of your head, the bottom of your feet. Just channel that feeling and imagine it flowing slowly out of you and really focus on it. Really focus on that feeling and that slowly coming out of you. Now when it gets to the near top of your head or the end of your hands or the bottom of your feet, I want you to give it a funny word like a stupid French accent. How does it sound? How does your pole sound? Can you give it a little French accent? So I want you to get that little ha 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 purple pole and just wash it away, just rinse it out. Just get rid of it, just, it's not necessary, it's not serving you. So wherever that was for you guys, and sometimes it takes a minute, sometimes it takes 10 minutes, it doesn't really matter. But the point of it being that if you focus on it, you can control that, and you can change its colour, you can change its shape, and you can get rid of it. And it's a great technique to achieve metamorphosis. If you're fearful about the next step, you don't know what that next step's going to be, because fuck, who does? You know, control that fear, go, what does it look like, what does it feel like, what does it sound like with that little French accent, and wash it out of your body. And from there, then you can take the actions that this beautiful man here said. You know, then you can become that lion, you can become that child, because that's our ultimate mission, right? So I think it's, you know, we need to have these ways, because everyone feels fear and anxiety. We're human beings, right? And one of the ways that's always worked for me, and in my job when I started my own business in marketing 4 years ago, you know, all of a sudden everything was up to me. My client success was up to me, and I shat myself. And the only way to get through that was to actually control your anxiety. Because if you can't control your anxiety, then it can control you. So that's a little technique that's worked for me, and I hope it works for you guys. Yeah, try it, whatever works. Give it a Russian accent if you want to, just make it funny. Sorry if anyone's Russian or French here, by the way. It could be a circle, it could be a pole, but just change the shape of it, change so you know that you're in control of it. And as soon as you know you're in control of it, it gives you your power. And when you have power, you have freedom. And when you have freedom, you can achieve metamorphosis. So I hope that helps you guys.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you know, for me, it's funny enough, like Tom said, we had a good chat about his process the other day where he just picked up the phone and started cold calling people and saying, hey, I've got this idea. Has anybody been in that stage who's got a great idea and has just not actually called people? Can you imagine what would happen if you did? For me, that anxiety moment, I was like, yeah, that's that picking up the phone. Like Michelle knows how much I resist that. It'll probably make a big difference. Something that you mentioned is like, what's next? What can be next? I just want to do a quick little 30-second thing that maybe you'll remember. I work with people helping them start their first business. And a lot of people sit here looking forward into the world and thinking, what can I do? What can I do? How can I get out of the box? How can I start my first business? And over the years, what I figured out, working with quite a few, like hundreds of people on this exact process, the way to figure out what's next for you is actually not to look forward at all, because then you end up selling fidget spinners or something stupid because it makes money, right? What you want to do is turn around and look back through your life and audit your life and look at what are the top 3 awesome nuggets that you have, top 3, 5, maybe 7, and then put them in a bowl and get the keywords, put them in a bowl, stir them up and make a mixture, make a soup out of the things that you've already created and stitch them all together to make a nice little micro niche. If anyone is at that stage in their life, come and see me after. This is the thing I talk about all day, every day. I love helping people find that next thing that can make a big difference in the world. So that's something that hopefully makes sense to you guys right now. Next up, Mr. Alex here. He is going to be stitching this nicely together. He's going to help us once again step through that phase from the camel to the lion and to step up and create something. May the force be with you.
Go get it. Thank you, Mr. Henderson. I wish I met you a few years ago. It would have been really helpful with some of the things I'm going to talk about. Public speaking is not my natural inclination. I have one particular person to thank for the reason I'm up here, which is Chichi Banboshi. I know a lot of Camp Bang Bang people know him, and he's really, really humble, which is why I think he's covering his face. But he's, frankly, one of the most passionate people I have ever come across. He has such an infectious zest for life. Like, he could walk into a retirement home and he would have everyone on tables dancing, laughing, crying within half an hour. What I love most about Chi-Chi is his authenticity, and I think that's one of the highest compliments you can pay anyone. And his goes all the way down to his core. So when a friend of that caliber asks me to do something like this, even though I hate speaking in public, you got to do it. I also struggle a bit with being vulnerable, so I want to thank Grit for that at the start. That's made it a bit easier, so thank you, because I'm on a personal journey with that. My story that I wanted to tell starts about 10 years ago, when I was younger, obviously. Going through school, I always found school really, really easy. I was like a camel, but I was a good camel. I was like going quite quickly, to go with your analogy. My major issue was I would see what other camels were doing, and I would think that was the thing to do. So I was driven by ego, and I was driven by chasing prestigious things. So I was at university engineering school, and all these people told me that investment banking is the thing you've got to do. You make all this money. It's fantastic. So I went away and applied myself, and I got a job at Goldman Sachs. I worked there for about 4 years, and along that journey there were so many times where my personal code of ethics were compromised. I saw it in my team, just things that happened that weren't aligned with my moral compass. If you've ever read a book called $1 Billion Whale, that goes into some of the detail of the things like that, and it was pretty bad. So at the end of 4 years, I left. I would like to say that it was because those ethics had been compromised, but I was still at that point a camel pointed in the wrong direction. I was really changing jobs because I wanted more money. So this firm hired me to go around the world and help build agricultural businesses from scratch, which sounded really cool, and they'll pay me more money. So this was all great until I started to increasingly see things again that were compromising my ethics. And it came to a head about 3 years into that job, where I was in Brazil, and a Canadian pension fund was buying vast tracts of farmland with the help of our firm to convert into crops to provide produce. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about the Amazon, but it's 40% of the terrestrial rainforest on the planet. It's basically the lungs of the entire planet. And so I saw it firsthand. I landed in Brasilia, and then I got in this tiny little light plane with this pilot who looked about 14. He had braces. It was really scary. He didn't speak any English either. But it was a really beautiful experience flying over this. It was this giant verdant landscape. But in the last 50 years, its original extent has been reduced by about 18%. Climatologists think that if it reduces by another 3 to 8%, it'll reach a tipping point where a cascade will happen and we could lose the entire Amazon rainforest. And this is something that I'm really passionate about. And I was learning about at the time. So anyway, I'm in this plane, seeing this beautiful, majestic landscape, and we fly and we land on this farmland that I'm running this transaction for. And I step out of this plane, and the investors and stuff are walking off, and I walk out into the crops. And it was the most soulless place you have ever experienced. There were no birds, there were no insects, there was absolutely nothing anywhere. It's what's known as a monoculture. Basically, they spray pesticides 8 to 12 times a year and herbicides, and they kill everything. Nothing else survives. So this had been virgin Amazon rainforest that had been bulldozed, laser leveled, and converted into this monoculture. Actually by a New York Stock Exchange listed company, which is ridiculous, but that is capitalism. So I had this watershed moment. It wasn't a lion moment, but it was maybe a false lion moment, because I left and I wanted to make a big impact. So I grabbed a really smart guy that I know, and we left, and we wanted to solve some of the biggest social impact issues in my country, in Australia. And the number one issue that we identified was the massive cost of fundraising for all of the charities in the country. So for most channels, it's something like 40%, and that's going to for-profit companies before a charity even gets it and has their own cost to run their own operations. So we embarked upon trying to solve this. So we built this prototype, we self-funded it, no salary, and I thought it was a lion moment. And 6 months into it, it failed. And it was funny because people say that bad things happen in threes, and I always said that was like a really stupid statement. But that was the first, and so this business fails, and it feels like it's a baby dying. You put your heart and soul into it. Everyone knows about it, all your friends, your peers, your family, and so the failure is like a stamp across the top of your head. The second thing that happened was the woman that I thought was the love of my life. We had this beautiful connection. Chi-Chi used to like see it and point out the connection all the time. To get poetic for a second, it maybe felt like we were like a binary star, just with such a strong gravitational pull. But we were pulled apart by something that was just circumstance that was so difficult to fight. Like a black hole pulling two stars apart. So that was the second thing. So I'm in the midst of this horrific place, having thought that I'd gone from a camel to a lion, and finally chosen a path for myself instead of something that other people had said is the thing to do. And that was when one of my closest friends, he died really, really tragically. And when people pass away, people often say that they're this fantastic person, and that's often almost always true. In his case, he really was just the most incredible person. And so I was completely depressed with these three things there, and I didn't know how to talk about it with anyone because I struggle with vulnerability. This is actually the first time I've talked about it in front of more than maybe two people. So I was completely and utterly depressed, and I had no idea what to do, and I was too afraid to talk about it or show or share. And I also had this stupid fucking man bun, and like if you have good hair like Grit or Stacy underneath that, if you have good hair, you can do a man bun. I can't. I don't have the structure. I thought I was going bald. Pulls out the hair. So I was depressed, shit hair. What actually helped was what got me through this, and I think was my real lion moment after the false one, was being really ruthless with my honesty. It was looking back on the path I'd taken and gone, all of these things I've been working towards, were they my goals? Were they things that I actually wanted to do? This idealistic teenager, this child that wanted to change the world and do these things. And then I ended up going to Goldman Sachs, and then, you know, helping destroy the Amazon for companies that still put out big sustainability brochures saying that they have these positive environmental impacts. And so I just went through everything, and some of my best friends and family helped and just were a sounding board, and I think communication is really the key. But it was that brutal, honest truth that I pushed into myself and outwards. And that was about 18 months ago. So winding the clock forward to now, having gone from there, we've managed to build a platform that has the lowest cost of fundraising in Australia. We have hundreds of thousands of dollars going through our platform for charities. It's virtually free for all of these charities that we're trying to help and enable. And I feel like I'm a lion finally. So much so that I've also taken on a second job launching an impact investment platform for some of Australia's wealthiest people. And I would never have been able to do any of this without that really honest truth. And that goes to some of what you were saying, Mason, because I really believe that fear is kind of like your imagination just working backwards. I think back on the best things I've done in my life, and often I was so scared before all of them. And then once you do them, you're like, why did I waste all of this effort and all of this time on that fear? So now I try to use my imagination to push through the fear, and that's been really helpful. And it was really similar to the process you took us through. So thank you. So that was my story. Thank you.
Well, look, guys, I think, we couldn't have had this run better. I want to take a little process with you guys again. We'll split into groups of 3, or 2s, or 4s, or whatever is the most appropriate. Try to get groups of 3. What we're going to do this time actually tease quite nicely off these last 3 speakers. I mentioned before, the best thing that you can do next is to turn around and find out what you have to offer and be really honest about what you've been through. What are your skills, your talents, your passions, your community, your experiences, your lessons? What's your wisdom? And how could you convert that to create something like Alex has done to help fundraising, or to help brains, or to help conscious entrepreneurs to get their message out better? So let's share with the people next to you. I'm going to use a timer again in case you weren't here before. I'm going to use a 1-minute timer. So I want you to look back in your life and be like, okay, so if I could get rid of the anxiety, if I could analyze my past and really go for it, and just be like, you know what, I don't give a fuck if it doesn't work. I'm going to put my hand up, I'm going to put a flag in the ground and say, this is my mission in life. What would that be for you? It might be the first time you've ever been bold enough to share this with people. And I want you to feel how it, feel what goes through your body if it's the first time. Say something big and bold and go for it. And what could you possibly do to make the world a better place? So you're going to have 1 minute per person. I'm going to give you... Okay, next people we have, everybody here. We all know that not everyone's okay out there. And maybe out here there's some people struggling. But out in the normal world... we have a lot of people that have no fucking idea how this system works anymore, and there's a lot of people not doing too well. So next up we actually have Sigmund Freud. Sigmund and Freud. They're going to help us through a process of, I can personally say, I don't know how to ask, are you okay? I don't know how to do that. And if I did ask that question, what do you do next? So these two people have figured out a way of helping us go through that. I think it's extremely valuable information for us to take forward into our lives and into our communities. So thank you for sharing this wonderful story. Welcome to the stage, Sigmund and Freud.
Woo. Thank you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. So we're going to take you through a little process that happened in our lives and that have created a metamorphosis moment for us. And out of that metamorphosis moment, something was created. Maybe the lion, or maybe it was the child. We'll discover that as we go. So we're going to shush you a little bit. Shh. Okay. Hey, how are you?
I'm not okay.
Oh, you're strong. You can do it. I know you can do it. Like, you're really strong. This was the conversation I had with my ex-partner. At that point of time, he was my ex-boyfriend already. We were not together for about a year, and he went into a depression because he was going through lion moment, where he's probably Camel in lion moment, where he lost the opportunity to get second funding for his amazing venture, which was microalgae and production of omega-3 from algae instead of killing the fish. Bottom line, he did not get the investment and he went into a flash depression for about 6 months. And after these 6 months, he took his own life. Obviously, this was a moment of, wow, what could I have done? What have I done wrong? And when I got that call from Italy informing me that that's what he's done, obviously I did not want that to be true. I did not believe it. And I just couldn't do it.
Yeah, it was early in the morning. I could actually hear her taking the call, and she said, "I can't believe that. What is there to believe?" In that moment, the world crushed for Gergana, or for Freud, as a player name. But in that moment, there's also an opportunity. And the opportunity is to be with it and actually accept it for whatever it is. So the first thing that happened is actually to listen to it. And the call came, and what was said?
After that call, I needed some soul searching, so I went to Italy, obviously, for the funerals, and then I went to India for a month. And when I came back, Marcus was there ready to propose something. It was very early stage of our relationship, 3 months in.
Yeah, so we all know that some people are not okay. And sometimes we may find out one way or the other. Sometimes we know work colleagues that actually don't come to work and they just take more sick leave than the average person. And so what can we actually do? So we may all know people in our lives that are not okay. So we're all aware that mental health is a topic to talk about. So we all know it's important because that's what empowers us to be our best. If we have mental health, if we're mentally healthy, we can realize our dreams, we can move from camel into lion and into child. But if we're not, then actually not ourselves, the whole society suffers. So we know it's a topic, but what to do next? So if someone says, I'm not okay, how will you be with them? What will you say? And to say you're strong, you're going to get through that, yeah, that's maybe helpful, but is it actually what's needed for that person in that moment? So this is how Share to Care Now was born, because we're sharing.
No, there is another thing that happened before. Yes, sorry. So I came back from India and he said, we're doing this. And I said, what are we doing? And he said to me, I found this course. It's in 22 countries. We got to do it. So we rock up at this course, which is 2 days course, and it's called Mental Health First Aid Course. And it's an Australian idea from about 30 years ago. These two guys from Canberra, the most boring place on earth. I apologize if someone is from Canberra here. So these two guys from Canberra, actually, they came up with the idea in the 80s, and they created and designed a course with scientists to actually empower the community around them to deal with people in their lives who are suffering from mental health issues or challenges for that matter. And what we discovered through them was that 1 in 5 Australians declares or goes to a psychologist, to your point before, asking for help. But actually 1 in 2 goes through a major crisis at least once a year in their life, and they're not aware of it, or they do not necessarily reach out to say, hey, I need help, right? And this is what Marcus discovered, and he came to me, actually, Zygmunt, and he came to me and he said, babe, we're doing this, let's do it. So 2 days in, we got the tools out of the Mental Health First Aid course, which empowered us to actually realize, and empowered me in person to realize what I was doing wrong with Francesco, my ex-partner who passed away, who committed a suicide. And it's not about doing wrong or right, but it's actually knowing and having the right tools to deal with things in your life, right?
I gotta check now what I say as the next thing. Yeah, it was not. Is it now born? No. Well, actually, as a German, that's my original nature. I'm from Berlin. We actually live in a very open society inside of Berlin. So you actually naturally let everyone be who they want to be. It's pretty much quite aligned with the Burning Man principles. So when we did the Mental Health First Aid course together for 2 days, 8 hours each day, you actually do role plays. And you do discover that there's a lot more to it than just listen. There's the deep connection and empathy that you gotta have for the person. And actually let them listen. Well, you listen to them what they say, and you also listen to them what's there for them. And you can usually only do that when you don't bring anything to it. Not your opinion on how they should be, not your opinion what's going to happen to them, purely being there for them and recreate what's the experience for them. Is it the pole? Is the pole in white, or is it in green, or is it your favorite color? That is purely being there for the person. So what we created is Share to Care Now, because through sharing ourselves genuinely, we actually show that we care. And I think, where was it? In the beginning, you shared yourself genuinely about what matters to you and what your life story was. And that actually gave all of us the access to look at our own lives. Because hands up, when you shared, who looked at their own life on what happened to them? Yeah. When we share about ourselves, we give others the access to look at their life and find an option and an opportunity for transformation for them. So Share to Care Now. Why now? Well, as you said, 1 in 5 people actually experiences anxiety, experiences symptoms of any kind of mental health challenge. But actually, in fact, 50% of us do suffer, but they actually don't seek help actively. So it's actually a widespread challenge of our society in Australia, but also globally. So Share to Care Now creates an environment in which everyone is heard, everyone can share themselves peacefully in a space, and we stand for the mental health first aid course to be adopted in the world widely.
Even more widely than it is adopted now. Indeed, you can do the first aid mental health course through the Red Cross, to the Mental Health First Aid Association in Australia, through the many different types of organizations around the world. Here in the US, they have it in Germany, they have it all around Europe. So it's one of those courses that gives us, as people in our society, the tools to deal with the people in our lives who are not okay, instead of just saying, oh, yeah, you can do it, or not knowing what to say when the time is up. So we did this beautiful event in Sydney in the Live Dome. We were supported, the Sound Live Dome, we were supported by the Red Cross, we were supported by the Mental Health First Aid course, and it was all done and created with our own resources. It's not a charity, it's not a non-for-profit yet. Maybe it will become in the future, we don't know. We are in a creation mode at the moment. The most important thing that we like to share with you is that it was created purely out of cold calling. So indeed, Marcus went to about 25 businesses, and he spoke with each and every one of the people there, and he said to them, hey mate, we're running this course on such and such date, come over or give us a silent auction items. And all of a sudden we had about 400 people following us on social media, 70 ambassadors worldwide, and as we speak, the second event is being organized by one of the ambassadors who got so enrolled, and she said, I'm going to run the same event in Brisbane. So she's running it in Brisbane on the 8th of September, as soon as we go back from the burn.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, to earlier what we said is to unleash the power that we all have. We all have the power to be there for our friends and family and even the people we work with, or actually we move and touch and inspire every single day. So sometimes a difference of 1, 5 or 10 minutes of listening and actually being with that person makes a transformative experience for them, and they might never get over that, and they might never otherwise realize something for their life. So what we all invite you now is to find one other partner next to you, just one partner. So just face the partner. Yes, don't be shy.
Oh, you are, okay.
So as soon as you face the partner of your choice, look at them in the eyes, and we're going to demonstrate if you want. So just look at them in the eyes, and do not communicate other than with your eyes. So do not say anything, just be with them for 30 seconds. Just look at them and try to see the humanity beyond the need to talk or the need to smile.
Admire what's beautiful about them.
Or if you feel crying, just cry. Great, I'm sure many of you have found something about another person. You can give them a hug. You can kiss them. And you can feel what humanity feels like. We are all here to touch, move, and inspire ourselves. And it's beautiful to be human because we can create things like a child. And then Marcus is going to explain something about something very cool, which is called Bite the Lemon and Lime Challenge. You're going to bite it.
I'm not here in front of everyone. So our offer and the opportunity for you is to do the mental health first aid course and equip yourself with the skills and the knowledge on how to be there for the people in your life that you love and that may not be okay. They have not shared that with you. And life is meant to be bittersweet, and we're the creators of that. For some of the people, it's sometimes a bit sour, and for some, it's a bit bitter. So join us, bite the lemon and the lime in front of a camera, upload it on your social media, and use it for good, and create the awareness for action for anyone to do the mental health first aid course. So join the Bite the Lemon and Lime Challenge.
That way we can create an empowered society that can all be child and can all create from nothing.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice work, guys. Thank you very much. And I think that's a nice way to kind of switch gears here, because we've been talking about how to go from where you are to maybe where you want to be. And our next few speakers are doing their thing. Mr. Clayton, you're next, just so you know. We have a couple of people coming up next who have gone through that phase of perhaps being the camel going through the lion phase, and are now sharing their big story. Oh, there's a few tissues out here today, isn't it pretty? Much love. So yeah, we've got some pretty awesome stuff. I just want to drop in there on this mental health stuff. One of the things I'm very privileged to be able to do back in my life is I actually help people with their personal finances. And something that I see which is just mind-blowing, and something that I think people really need to be aware of this. I run these workshops on how to set up a banking structure with your internet banking. And the first thing I do is get people, like this many people in a room, I get people to log into internet banking on their phone. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to show you how to do some cool stuff. So they log into internet banking, and then I say, okay, so just before we start, just pass your phone to the person next to you, so other people can see your internet banking, right? And they freak the fuck out. And it's like, what the fuck? I'm not showing somebody my bank balance. Like, that's so taboo. That, my friends, is a big problem in the world, because some of your closest friends are suffering hard with their personal finances. They might have a great business, but they're not keeping anything, and they can't do their life properly. They can't gift, they can't share, they can't convert from camel to lion when they can't save any of their money. So my suggestion to you when you go home, and it's a really taboo subject, but ask your friends how their personal finances are. Even if you can't help them, it's a dirty little secret that no one ever shares with their friends, and it's something that needs to change, because it holds people, it keeps them stuck in the matrix, and they can't share, they can't do big things when their personal finances are a mess. So if you're good with your money, just do a gentle ask, because most of your friends are flat broke and it sucks. Anyway, next, let's hear from Mr. Clayton. He has, last year, how many shopping trolleys was that? 110 shopping trolleys stuck into some crazy ass spiral. Who saw that last year? Anyone see that? That's this guy. Yeah, and this year he's done something of a much bigger scale, and he's been learning very fast. Let's hear his story. Thank you, Mr. Clayton.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thanks for having me today. Can you nudge me in 10 minutes? I tend to waffle. Today I just wanted to, talk, and in keeping with the theme that's been discussed earlier, that real leap of faith, that moment when you leave the safety of possibly a normal job, a well-paying job. For me in particular, I'm a single dad. I have sole custody of 2 young children, so transitioning from a job to follow my art practice was terrifying for me, because my kids deserve a regular paycheck. They have school fees. I need to feed them, pay rent, all those things. So it really did mess with me, and I was racked with guilt for a lot of the time because we went without, and so. Yeah, it's a really important thing, I think, for us to discuss. And whilst I'm going to talk briefly about some of my successes, I think today I'd like to share with you some of my failures, because I think we're going to get a lot more out of that, and there's certainly been a lot of them. So last year I built the shopping trolleys. It was a collaboration with Costco. It was my first burn. I rocked up. They all said bring a gift, so I bought a gift, but I really had no idea what to expect, and I arrived seriously ill-equipped. I had a welder which didn't work, all these things, and so we tried 3 times. So we welded it together, we stood it up, it failed, we went again, failed again, and I called all the stakeholders from Burning Man.org, and I said, listen, I think we've thrown enough resources at this project, let's just quit. I've travelled a long way, I want to enjoy the burn. And to their credit, and it was a really kind of defining moment for me, and probably the most transformative part of my burn, they said, no, we're not going to let you quit. And so they threw 3 welders at it. They gave me 2 cranes and anything else I needed. And so I was ready to walk, and they said, "No, you're not going to walk. We won't let you." And they supported me, and that was a really transformative moment for me to know that it wasn't just I came from Australia with one other, and yeah, so not much of a crew, and it was a beautiful thing. And so since then, and me taking that kind of leap of faith to build trolleys in the desert, I've sold that piece into Canada, into Vegas. So Meow Wolf have purchased it, and it's the signature piece for their new concept in Las Vegas. We've built it at Rainbow Serpent in Victoria. As a permanent piece, and so there's lots of opportunities that kind of on the back of Burning Man. So Burning Man will always be incredibly dear to me because it was that moment where things started to get real in my life, and I could start to pay for school fees and feed the kids, which is a really nice feeling. So for the clock 6 months, and I thought, what can I do at Burning Man this year? And so for me, building art on the other side of the world and then shipping it across really is not clever, and it's incredibly expensive. And so what I try to do is source materials locally, do all the work in advance. And so I sourced some shipping containers, and I thought I wanted to do something that's never been done before, and so we engaged some engineers, and we spent a good 3 or 4 months trying to connect 8 shipping containers in a ring with no visible connectors. So we used the forklift pockets, lots of engineering, lots of welding, and so we arrived here. I felt really confident that we could get this done. We'd been we'd been speaking to a lot of the people involved, the crane drivers, the engineers, and so we all arrived here knowing what to expect. And so our first consult with the entire team, the crane driver said, "So it's £40,000? And I went, "Yeah, we've discussed this months ago." He even told me the type of chain that I needed to source in order to pick it. And he said, "We just don't have a big enough crane to lift your piece into position." And so from that moment, we started to scramble. We had to re-engineer it. They wanted us to cut it in half and then attach the 2 circles. And yeah, lifting a single unit is very easy compared to lifting 2 halves, and especially when they're £40,000. And so we pushed and pushed and tried, and I experienced the entire range of emotions. And I decided that it couldn't be done, and that's really not in my nature. I really like to kind of, whether it's integrity, I like to just push through and get things done. And I told Burning Man Org that we were going to deliver something really monumental, and I really wanted to commit to it, but I couldn't do it for a number of reasons, possibly out of my control. Maybe I should have been more thorough or asked different questions to the crane driver to ensure that they had the right equipment. So we've built something that I'm not particularly proud of, and creating large-scale public art is really confronting because you're basically putting it out there and you're inviting people to judge and criticise and put forward an opinion. So it was difficult for me to do, but I felt as though I had to assemble it. So it's out there to the right of the big elephant, and it's just a big block of ugly shipping containers. There's nothing special about it. Someone's already fallen off it and broken an arm. Yeah, read the back of your ticket. Anyway, but I'm really getting some good feedback. So for those people that don't know my story and that it was a disaster, they go, "Wow, this brutalist architecture is really cool," and we can, and we engaged a really cool lighting consultant. So we've thrown some interesting lights in there. So is it a failure? Probably, in my opinion, it is. It's not something that I'm particularly proud of. I don't even know whether I'm going to put it on my website. I will certainly come back and commit to doing what we originally proposed to do. But yeah, I've had a number of those artistic challenges, when developing and evolving my artistic practice over the years. And on so many occasions just wanted to kind of call it quits and give up. Not kind of mentally prepared for the public ridicule when you put something. So who's from Australia here? I suspect that everyone. There's a lot of us. So I've exhibited at Sculpture by the Sea several times in beautiful Bondi. The Swell Sculpture Festival is on the week we get back. So I'm here with Tess, who's another amazing artist from Australia. So we have a lot of work on. And then, so I go back, we install Swell. I have a few large pieces. And then I'm off to Calgary in Canada to build more trolleys. And that's going in as a permanent piece into their science museum. And so, yeah, some really exciting stuff happening. But the flip side is there's some really amazing learnings happening. So this monumental failure out there that I have to look at every day, and this is a constant reminder of where I got it wrong. But no, I'll take all that on board, and I think next year we'll be a bit more organised. But it is, it's certainly challenging building large-scale public art on the other side of the world, and it does require kind of a pretty cool team. And I think that's it. Yeah. Are we inviting questions or not really?
Yeah, any questions?
There's only 8. Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, for me, because with my, and I guess this is a nice segue. So I know so many talented people, and they are just incredible artists. But what they don't have is this, I guess, this entrepreneurial kind of theme. So that is their business, and they struggle, they do it tough, and they don't apply this kind of entrepreneurial mindset, and they don't kind of actively pursue opportunities. And so that's one thing that I'll just give you a real quick my background. So who's ever been to Spud Bar in Australia? Anyone? So I started Spud Bar. I started in October 2000 in Blessington Street, St Kilda, and I was just selling baked potatoes, and people were loving it. And then we opened up another one in Hawthorne, in Paran, in Collins Street, and we got to 20 stores, and we franchised. And then I sold it to the wrong person at the wrong time for the wrong price. But a lot of the art that I do, I kind of apply those lessons that I learnt from Spud Bar all those years ago. And it's still my favourite place to eat. So if you're ever in Australia, go grab a Spud. All right. Any other questions? We all good? Sure. So I think all of us have the ability. So I think the question was, what was the narrative or what was the message that you're trying to convey? And so everyone has the capacity to create objects. We all can create. For me, what's really important, especially as my profile kind of rises, is that I have a real responsibility to say something. Last year, the piece was called Perpetual Consumption. And I just wanted to get people thinking that we are on this roller coaster, and it's really hard to get off. And so that narrative, I hope, kind of came through, and I think that's why it's resonated a lot. I did a piece many years ago called Project Bread, and I assembled a giant pyramid out of 1,700 bread crates. And I like that connection, so bread or dough or dollars or money, and it was about the global wealth pyramid, and that 50% of people, 1% of the wealth is owned by, is that right? 50% of the wealth is owned by 1%. Yeah. And that was the message, and so it was it was pretty important. Anyway, so the narrative is really important, and it's critical. Sometimes conceptually, sometimes the object comes before the narrative, sometimes it's the other way around. There's no real science, no real right or wrong, but the message is critical, I think. We good? Thank you.
I look forward to very safely climbing on top of a bunch of containers out there, and I'm going to do a dance to celebrate and break my arm. No, I'm not into breaking arms. Next up, we have a guy called Aiden. Aiden and I, we actually met. Who's been to Bali? Who's been to a little bar called O3? Anyone know that? It's just down the road from La Brisa. Yeah, very cool place. We got to hang, and Aiden told me a very beautiful story about his life. Hey, Mira, can you grab those 2 amazing bottles of tequila back there? Just hold those up. He's not going to be talking about this at all, but he just happens to have some exquisite tequila that he produces in Mexico whilst living on a beach in Bali. So one thing I always like to talk about when I help people start their business is start a business, make some money, create a big difference in the world and make something amazing so that you can be proud of. Yeah, you can open it, bro. But what's most important is that you design a business that gives you a nice lifestyle. Because if you've got a nice lifestyle, then you can sustain that business and that purpose. If your business just consumes you and your lifestyle sucks, you're probably going to not enjoy what you do, and there won't be much love in it. So this boy here lives a great life, and we had a couple of nice drinks on the beach as the sun was going down. He's got a beautiful story, and he's got a beautiful mission. Mr. Aiden, come on down. Come on up.
Thank you, Stacy, and thanks to everybody who's shared their stories. It's been really awesome to hear. So I thought I'd just start by sharing a little bit of, my journey. And then the first half, share my journey, and then what I've been searching for, and then the second part, sort of let you know what I found, I know I need to do, and explain a little bit about the vision for that. So I grew up in a really poor family in New Zealand, pretty dysfunctional. My dad was a pastor, and I remember growing up with my sisters, sitting at home, like state housing, holding hands, praying for food, and it just always struck me as like everything I'd been told was a lie. Dad, preaching all this stuff, and yet they played it safe their whole life, and look where it got them. So I just felt like I needed to do something really different, and I felt like that I needed to look a really long way away from where I was to find it, because they were nowhere near it. So about a week before my 16th birthday, I found out that at 16 you're legally an adult, so I can go and do my own thing. So I spoke to my mum and I said, "Mum, look, I'm going to run away. I'm planning on going now. I can wait another week if you like. But I'll probably end up resenting you if so if you let me go now and let me go on my journey, I think we'll be good somewhere down the track." So I saved up my money, and the only place I could afford to run away to, being from New Zealand, was Australia. So a few days before my 16th birthday, I jumped on a plane, went to the Gold Coast with $500 in my pocket and a set of golf clubs. I used to want to be a professional golfer. And while I was over there, I just sort of began the search, and I ended up getting into some stuff I shouldn't have gotten into, and I got addicted into gambling, and went into a bit of a depression, and started doing things that weren't resonating with who I knew I was on the inside. And it got to the point where I thought about suicide, and my best mate growing up had moved with me to Australia. Real good looking dude, good at all the stuff that you want to be good at in Australia and New Zealand, like cricket and rugby and all the stuff that I couldn't do, And I always used to look at his life and just think that he was so blessed. And if someone had asked me if I could change my life and swap it out for anyone, I wouldn't have said a celebrity or I would have said Daniel. And so he was the only person I had to talk to. I pulled him aside one day and I just said, "Look, man, this is embarrassing for me to talk to you about this, but I thought about killing myself." And so he said something to me which changed my life, and he actually told me that a few months before he'd moved over there, he had not only thought that, but had actually gone and he'd hung himself from the garage roof, and his brother just happened to walk in as he was hanging there and lifted him up and saved him. And that gave me this perspective. I was like, fuck, like life isn't easy for anybody, and so sometimes you just need to fucking man up and just deal with it, and on the other side of it will be some magic. So I decided that to do a 180 I needed to do something outrageous, and I'd saved up a bit more money. I could afford a flight a bit further away than Australia, so I spun a globe and I put my finger on it, landed on Uzbekistan, and so I had no idea where it was. I googled it, and it was 25 degrees below zero, and I was actually living out of my car before this for a bit, and my car had got stolen one day outside of my third job, so I walked outside, my house was gone with all my shit, so I didn't have any warm clothes. So I gave myself one respin, and I made sure I pointed near the equator. So I landed on the Philippines, which I had no idea where that was, obviously knew it was near the equator, but so I bought a ticket to the Philippines, jumped on a plane, and lost myself a bit. I was an illegal alien, and I would have been, I don't know how I would have got out of there alive, but a Filipino mafia family actually took me in, and so I got sort of unofficially adopted by this crazy family in the Philippines. They were just amazing. So I got 3 Filipino brothers, 2 Filipino sisters, 66 cousins, just amazing. And they gave me so much love, when I hadn't had it, and I found it in the most unlikely of places. And one day I was sitting down with my Filipino dad, and he's a very powerful man in the Philippines. And me and him just formed this really amazing bond. And he had like 4,000 staff, and everybody spent their entire life trying to please him and trying to get some sort of just one little glimmer of gratitude from him, like well done, and that would keep them going for the next 6 months. But for some reason I could just go along and there's a guy who has grenade launchers and cyanide tip bullets and all sorts of crazy shit going on, and I'd just go up to him and say, hey bro, your moustache is a bit crooked, who did that? And he's like, nobody had ever talked to him like that. So he used to sit down with me in the backyard where he breeds fighting cocks, and we just drink cheap brandy, and he'd just impart this wisdom on me. And one day I said to him, I said, I don't know how I can ever repay you for saving my life, And he said something really profoundly beautiful and simple that stuck with me, and it was just, when you can pay it forward to one person, consider your debt repaid. And I just thought that was so amazing that he didn't want anything for himself. He just wanted to know that his good deed was transmuting onto someone else. So I made a mental promise to myself then, that was 20 years ago, that I was going to search for a way to help so many more people, so that while he was still alive I could go back to him and show him all these people that had been helped and say, this is because of you and that conversation we had with the fighting cocks and the cheap brandy. So that sort of sent me, I left the Philippines. I was an illegal alien. I got out of there in some crazy story. I won't go off on a tangent, but well, when I got there, I didn't know anyone. I wanted to go out and meet girls and have some connection with people and stuff. So I went out to a bar and I just picked a couple of guys at a bar who looked like they were nice, and I walked up to them and said, hey guys, I'm Aiden from New Zealand, just ran away here. Can I buy you a beer? So I bought these two guys a beer, and to this day they're both friends of mine. But one of them ended up working at the Senate. They have the same sort of government system as the US. And when it came time for me to go home, I was like, bro, like, you work in the government, I'm a legal alien, I don't know what's going to happen. And he goes, oh, don't worry about it, bro, come into work tomorrow. So I go into work, and it's the Senate. I was like, shit. So I go into his office, and he goes, he's like, hey guys, he goes, yeah, and come with me just down to the office next door. We go to the office next door, and the sign of it says like Chief of Immigration. So I go in with my passport, and the Chief of Immigration just starts laughing at me, and he goes, I heard your story, cool story, man. And I was like freaking out, and he goes, I've got a really bad problem with my slice, can you help me? So he ended up wanting me to take him out for a golf lesson. And then he goes, oh shit, I need to get my mate in here, and he calls in the chief of the NBI, which is like the National Bureau of Investigation. He was in the office down, and he had a problem with a hook. So I ended up going out for the game of golf with these two guys, and I ended up having to go back the next day because we forgot about stamping the passport. We were talking about golf, and he just stamped the passport and said, if you want to come and live here or do anything, you're basically a Filipino citizen. So where that set me with that they gave me that love that I didn't get in my family life, it set me off on my journey to just go around the world, and about 60 countries later, and a whole bunch of crazy stories, including getting kidnapped and marooned on an island, like you name it, it's happened to me. I've started a bunch of businesses, and I've always been really creative and had a knack with brands, but something hasn't been fulfilling me, and I've been looking for that. And about 5 years ago I came to Burning Man for the first time, and I started to get a feel of what love and acceptance and what, just people embracing you for who you are and not picking out your differences as a flaw, but instead seeing it as an advantage, which was really awesome because it made me feel like that thing that had been guiding me wasn't wrong. I just hadn't found my tribe. So about 2 years ago I dabbled in ayahuasca for the first time, and I really wanted to learn about love because I felt like love was the answer, because that had been what had gotten me through all the hard times. And it came to me to start this, I'd had a brush with suicide. Obviously I've lost a couple of good friends to suicide. New Zealand men have the highest rate of suicide in the world, from like I think 18 to 25, so it's really, really bad problem. And I looked at that and I thought, because I'd been there, I knew it was love that I was lacking when I was there. And because I had that love with that one person, that was enough to save me. So it might only take one person, right? But you just got to be able to connect with that person. So I came up with the idea on ayahuasca of how do we utilize like technology, what we've got now, and bridge that technology gap with the love and the energy that's out there that we can't see, that we all know is very real. So we're building an app basically. So say for example, I'm feeling depressed and I don't have anyone to talk to. New Zealand, Australia, we have a big, it's the masculine rugby culture. Where you talk about your feelings. I figure these people need something where maybe they can do it in the quiet of their own room and still have the connectiveness with people, but not have to be vulnerable to somebody that they might lose face with, and that's what they think. So basically, the app would allow me to jump on the platform and go, I need some love. And people around the world who've got a spare 2 minutes free in their mindfulness practice, maybe they're just finishing a meditation, just about to go to bed on their lunch break, they can see, Aiden in New Zealand needs some love. So they opt in and they say, yeah, I'll fucking give them some love. There's no race, religion, colour, none of that. They only know Aiden in New Zealand needs love. So there's no judgment, because you've got to remove all the judgment to get real love. So then what happens is everyone's app syncs and everybody does a 2-minute love meditation sending love to Aiden. And about 1:30 into the meditation, everybody's prompted to say, I love you, Aiden. And our software collates all the I love yous and makes a soundbite at 528 megahertz, which is the frequency of love. And we send that straight to the person. So you've gone from, sometimes if you're going through a rough time and it's 1 a.m. and you don't have anyone to talk to, if you're even lucky enough to have someone to talk to, you can't access it. You can't wait till Monday, till the therapist opens or your mate comes back from holiday. So 2 minutes after you've needed love and had nothing, you get, oh, you thought you were alone? There was 5,000 people around the world that just sent you 2 minutes of love. It's 10,000 minutes of love that was sent to you in 2 minutes. That came from 26 countries, from people that don't even know you. And it's not a like on a Facebook button or something meaningless like that. It's 2 minutes where they're taking a focused time out for you. That's 2 minutes out of their life, their valuable time, to send to you because they know you need love. So then you get the stats. And I've always been fascinated by the idea of paying it forward. Like my Filipino dad said, pay it forward to 1. I was like, what if I can pay it forward to 2 and or 3 and find a way for them to be able to do it to 3, and then you get the exponential growth, and that's when it gets really exciting down the track. So we've come up with a system of love credits, and the basic premise that I've learned is that in order to, love should be free and accessible, and it is. We just don't have the access to it. But there is a price to pay, and you need to pay 3 2-minute blocks of love out to the universe, and for every 3 2-minute blocks of love that you pay out, you get a love credit. And because you've earned that love credit can be given to your friend who might have been diagnosed with something, who's going through a breakup, who's got financial difficulty, whatever the reason for love is, and you can gift it to them. And when you gift it to them, they get a code, like your, Uber, invite a friend sort of thing, and we track it. So if you were to give love to 10 people, and those 10 give it to 10, to 10, to 10, to 10, at 5 layers deep, there's 100,000 people that got love because of you. So we track it all. So now when you wake up in the morning, you check your app, and you see where you are on the worldwide love leaderboard. You can see where do you rank in your school, in your country, in the world. And so it becomes a game. We create the greatest game on the planet, where it's like, shit, man, I need to get my score up. But how do you do that? You go and send some more love, right? Send it to as many people as you can. You got a podcast, put a podcast about it and give them a link. You got a website. And so because you start to get to numbers that are so large, the way I see it is you've got all the stats out there. If you've got 100,000 people that call a suicide hotline, they can tell you how many people, might have committed suicide if they didn't get help. So because you've now got 100,000 people, we can say, hey, look, you saved 300 lives. And you might have saved 50 lives while you were sleeping. Now, you don't need to have a bunch of money to do it. A 10-year-old kid in the Philippines, because I felt like they need just as much access to this love as a wealthy entrepreneur does. So, and they should be on a level footing too, because they've got energy to give and love to give. So now a 10-year-old kid who feels like I did, powerless, not able to make a difference, because how can you change the world when you're just one tiny kid, with no resources? Now we can educate kids and show them that they can, and empower them. Imagine how a 11-year-old kid feels when they go to school in the morning and they see that they saved a life while they were sleeping, just because of the energy they put out. They're going to think twice about bullying. They're going to think twice about being nasty. They're not going to pass judgment on someone, you know. Yeah. So yeah, it's basically it. There's a bit more to the concept, but I want to. My vision is to create the social media platform of the future where there's no room for sledges or people that want to go and give shit. It's just love and no judgment or nothing. It's just basically connecting Burning Man type people and people with that energy with the people that need it the most. And we can all. I guess there's one other aspect which I think is probably quite interesting from some of you guys who have got the technical sort of background on what you're doing, is we know it's all real, but it's always intangible. Like, you know, you just go, send them some energy, and, you know, a lot of people, the naysayers will be like, oh, yeah, it's a bunch of hocus pocus. But there's a company in America that we found that has developed the first artificial intelligence in the mindfulness space. So using a wearable device, it can measure your scale of emotion, and it starts to learn when you're about to lose it, when you're about to, you know, when you're feeling bad and your blood sugar's low, whatever, and it can start to, they've got all these experts programmed into it, and it'll send you a little notification when it starts to learn that you're heading down that path, and it'll say, Aiden, you need to take a minute, send a 2-minute love meditation, or go and do a breathing exercise, or whatever. So, on its own, that's really powerful, but when you put it together with the Love app, it becomes really, really interesting, because this is Beth, my lovely partner, another amazing reason that I've been able to just tap into this love. But say, for example, sorry, losing my train of thought a little bit here. Beth does that. Yeah. So if Beth's getting love on our platform and she's plugged into the system, and we get 10,000 people around the world to send her love, we get to see in real-time data what's happening with her physiologically at the real time that the energy is being sent to her. And then what it'll also allow us to do is, if everyone who's giving the love is also on it, we can see what are the similarities, like what, because I believe we're all connected, and we just don't understand. We've forgotten that there's been all this shit that's put in the way. But I think we can show that the people that are giving the love are getting just as much benefit as the person that needs it. And when we can put that into data and show you, oh, you don't believe in that? Here's the numbers. 30% lower cortisol, this and that, whatever. It's like, shit, anyone who's not going to want to do that every day? Who's not going to want to get love from thousands of people around the world to start their day and finish their day? And all it's going to cost you is 6 minutes of your time. That's a bargain, right? Yeah, so yeah, that's where it's at. If anyone's got any questions or anything, I'm happy to answer them. I'd love to talk to some of you. I feel like there's so many synergies with what you guys have talked about, and I'm grateful that I wasn't first, because I'm not a speaker. It's the first time I've spoken about this to a group like this. And it took, like, Stacy saw something in me, I think, which, you know, he called me up and he's like, bro, I really want you to do it. I was like, oh, bro, I don't know, man, I don't know if I can do that. And there's something inside me said, no, this is my 5th burn, and I knew if I'm going to get up and share this, like, this is the best possible environment to share it with. And the what, sorry? 20 years of fucking crazy searching in hardship, and about 16 ayahuasca sessions in the last year. Yeah. And I mean, community, right? Is why we come back every year. Like, this is we've found that, we've tapped into that, and you wouldn't ever let that be taken away from you once you've been a part of it and experienced the magic. And we need to make this accessible and leave some breadcrumbs for the people that are a little bit slower to maybe pick up on this kind of stuff, and just give them a loving little guide into, say, hey, did you check this out? This might work, and then start to let them discover for themselves, and then they'll start to ask better questions, and the world will wake up. Yeah.
You know what I really loved about that? Really nervous speaking. As you talked about something you were super passionate about, so you just relaxing your body.
Yeah.
You look great.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Yeah, great stuff.
trademarks.
One more question, yeah, go.
You got that trademark.
What's the app called?
The Love app. I didn't want to make it some fancy brand thing. Like, it needs to be something that every person from every culture understands that word straight away.
Yes, definitely. It's so much easier to just call it what it is. Guys, it is officially over the 3 o'clock finish time. If anyone has somewhere they're supposed to be, which I know is not true, but this is an invite. If you do have somewhere you're supposed to be, feel free to, you know, we were supposed to finish at 3 o'clock, but, you know, that's just the way it is. Our next speaker, firstly, do we have Jason here? Jason, have you shown up? No. Okay, cool. Our last speaker today has quite a story to share. His name is Antonio. He's... I don't even know if I should introduce him, but he's doing pretty massive things in the world. At the end of this talk, we're going to do a little process as well, so stick around. I don't really need to introduce you, dude. Get on up. You've got an amazing story to share. Let's go.
First of all, give it up to Stacy for putting this together. Grit. Thank you, Capitan. Tom, I don't know if he's here. Thank you guys for this amazing space. Look at this. Not everyone gets to wear this. I mean, you gotta be a veteran. So, okay. So I'm gonna start sharing a little bit about myself. I'm sorry for those of you that have already heard this last year. But my idea today was a little bit of my inspiration to do what I do. And hopefully you'll get some bits and pieces of it and potentially transfer it to your lives. So I am the chairman and CEO of this organization called Keep a Child Alive. And what we do is pretty self-explanatory. We try to keep children alive as best as we can. We have 120,000 kids right now in 9 different countries. We focus on, we have housing for orphans, unfortunately. We have health clinics. We have hospitals, small hospitals. We have education centers. I don't want to call them schools because that's too old school. So education centers, training centers for careers. And I am going to take a step back and tell you how I got there and how I became the most selfish person on the planet. Because this is, seriously, I do it for selfish reasons. So I was born and raised in Spain. And I was born in a family that my parents worked their asses off to just give us an education. They didn't have any money, so I had to start working relatively early, and I became an entrepreneur at the age of 14. I built my first company back then, and I was really lucky to be successful semi-early. And I say lucky because, not because I made money, but because I realized rather early that money was not the answer to my prayers. I thought that it was because I could buy anything I wanted, but happiness came and went as quickly as that money came, right? So I realized relatively early that I was not in the right path, and I was young, right? So I was like 20 years old, and unfortunately I got sick, and I had to go through a very difficult time personally, and that put me in a spot of really rethink what I wanted to do with my life. So in a lot of searching, not 20 years, but a lot of searching, I came about this organization called Keep a Child Alive, which was started by a lady that you may or may not know. Her name is Alicia Keys. And give it up for Alicia for a second. She's awesome. Yeah. I'm going to sing a song. So Alicia started it in 2003 out of a response of HIV treatment for children, which is such a simple concept of like, I give you medication, you live. That's it. But you have to take that medication on an ongoing basis. And one of the things that we realized relatively early is that you cannot just give medication to a child. You have to give them food. Because if they take a medication and they don't eat, then what's going on, right? And then you have to give them some sort of education because when they live, they want to live forever, right? And it becomes like this vicious circle of support to a child. And it's that ecosystem of support. And so I realized that I had to make a shit ton of money so I could do this forever. So I run a venture capital out of New York as well. So I use capitalism very much towards that goal. And so I'll tell you the triggering point. I became part of the board of the organization in 2011, and I started donating money, which was so easy for me. I was like, write a check. It was convenient, tax efficient. This country's amazing for that. And I just donated money, and it made me feel semi-good, right? But then I went to Africa. And then I got to Africa, and I got to Uganda, to our largest clinic in Kampala, and I started going there as if I was like semi-god. I was just walking around like floating. People were like thanking me for the opportunity to talk to me, and I was like, this makes me feel like shit. I'm not doing anything. All I'm doing is writing a check. That's it. So that's not what I thought at that point, because it was making me feel really good. I was like, oh, you're welcome, you're welcome, you're welcome. But what happened next is that there was this little kid that just tried to get through to me. It's like a lot of people, and he just kept running and trying to get through to me. A yellow t-shirt, I will never forget this. Kept running towards me. And I finally stopped the crew and I said, like, hey, what's going on? Let him pass. So they let him pass. He looks at me like almost like, oh, I don't know what to do. Hands me this letter and runs away. I put it in my pocket. I don't make anything about it. Put it in my pocket. I talked to the lady that runs the clinic. And I said, what's going on with this kid? And she was like, so this kid is 13 years old. He was born with HIV. Both his parents died of HIV. And he's been in our clinic since he was born. So it's really amazing. And he wanted to somewhat thank you for what you do. I was like, what the fuck do I do? Really? Like, what do I do? And so I put that letter in my pocket. I didn't make the most of it. And then I sat down in my plane. On the plane is not my plane, somebody else's. But yeah, I got on the plane. I got on the plane, and I don't have a plane, just for the record. I want to make that clear. No, I don't have one. Yeah. No, so it was other people's plane. So I think it was Iberia or something. But what was that? No. Okay. So I got on the plane, and then I pull up this letter as I was having my glass of wine. Pull up this letter, and the letter reads as follows. And I know it by heart because it's hanging on my wall. And it's a letter that has changed my life forever. So the letter reads as follows. It says, dear friend, which I thought was interesting because he knew my name. But dear friend, I thank God because you're still alive. I was like, oh, that's nice. I'm sorry for this, but one day you will leave this world and you will never come back. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of knowledge for a kid, right? So I'm like reading this, I'm like, fuck. So then he goes like, really? And it says, really. For those of you who have been in my house, just the letter says, really, you will never come back. Your parents will die. Your family will be really sad because they will not hear your smile. Every single person that has been through your life will remember you, but you will for sure never come back. And I was like, fuck. And then the next paragraph is the thing that triggered all the change in my life. So he said, even though all these things will happen for a fact, it will not mark your end because you will stay in my heart forever. And that, yeah, please give it up for that guy. So at that point I was like, fuck, this kid just changed my life. I thought, if this kid can be a leader in his community because of the work I do, then we can change the world. And so the opportunity that we have, all of us here at Burning Man, is that we're so connected with each other that if we can convey this exact message with your co-workers, family, people around you, the message of just altruistic giving, just giving for the sake of giving, and ultimately will become selfish giving because you give and you want to give more. It's pretty powerful. and I'll give it to you firsthand. Kids like this, no child should die of HIV. No child should die of HIV today. And today, unfortunately, I'm going to give you a statistic that is really saddening, and some people don't even know about it. But HIV is the #1 cause of death in children in Africa today. The #1 cause of death of kids like him that I don't have the ability to go to the many millions of kids that are born with HIV, so I need help. But this kid is now, today, 5 years later, a leader in his community. He is working for me in one of my clinics where he does this to a bunch of children. So how empowering is that one kid had a domino effect to change the lives of most of the people around him? And how empowering it is that if all of you, each and every one of you, look at the things that you can provide. Because monetarily, you might say, I don't have money, so I'm just going to pause it for a bit until I make money. Yes, but it's not just monetarily. You can just change people's lives by just looking at them, like we just did. Like by just hugging them, by just giving yourself without expecting something in return. And when you do that, you will really realize that it's addictive. It really is addictive. So I will tell you, and I will end with this, that if we all look at ourselves and we all look at the things we do on our daily lives and expect something in return, then just look deeper and try to start shifting the paradigm to see if you can do things without expecting anything in return. And you'll see, like I saw with that letter, I wouldn't have seen it otherwise, that if you do that, it will change your lives forever. And this is my first-hand experience. So that's it.
Yeah, epic stuff. Right, guys, so it's almost time to go see Macwood Fleet, I believe it is, over at Pink Mammoth, which is exciting. I believe they started at 2:30, but that's a good thing to go and see if you can catch up on. But before we go, I want you guys to have a think about what is the one thing from all the speakers today, what's the one thing that hit you the most? For me, it was actually the brave thing that Tom did, which was just, he had an idea and he picked up the phone and he was telling me yesterday, he went out and he found the most influential people, we're talking in America and Australia, who do what he wanted to do, and he called them and he emailed them, we're talking the top, and he said, hey, I've got this idea, can we have a chat? And a bunch of them said yes, and I'm sitting there going, what the fuck, why don't I do that? That's my takeaway. And I got that from our first speaker. But who was it that gave you that thought that tonight, when you get home, if you have a home, wherever you're going to be, what are you going to do? What is the one thing that came to you? So we're going to get into our little groups of threes, even new people if you want to do. And I want you to say it out loud, and I want you to really, make that statement. What action are you going to take from the lessons and the wisdom and the amazing stuff that you've heard here today that you can take home to the world? What's something you're going to, what action you're going to take to make things different, okay? So get into your groups of three. Let's just do 30 seconds each. It doesn't need to be a big story. We just want one bold statement that has clarity and determination. What's the thing you're going to do when you get home? After that, we've got one more thing to do. All right, we'll do 30 seconds and go. What are you going to do when you get home to make things different? Okay, guys. Last little process before we head off into the dust and find some more shade somewhere else. By the way, you're very welcome to stay here. We have a lot of drinks at the bar. We're probably going to maybe put some music on or something like that, but chill in the lounge here. Last thing, guys, before you go. Everybody that you've heard from today has done something with the principles of Burning Man. They've created a vehicle of some description that it shares the philosophy and the wisdom and the lessons that we learn out here in the dust. And then in their own way, they have a way of expressing that and teaching that and sharing that with the world. We all learn this here, and we all have this epic community of people who we know. If we meet someone who's a burner, we hug them. You know, we trust them. And do you have a way where you get to put that into the world? And if you do, I want you to share that with the people across from you. And if you don't, I want you to make a bold statement once again, just as we finish off here. What is a way, firstly, a way to think about this? What is a problem that you can solve? What is a certain type of person who's going through the problem that you can solve, and how would you solve it? Okay, 1 minute per person, and I want you to think, how can you create an entity, a vehicle, a business, a movement, or something with the Burning Man principles that you can take home, so that it's not just you living this awesome life with this stuff that we get to learn, but how can you pass it on and share it with the world? How can you become the child and play? 1 minute per person. We can sit here and talk about this for the rest of the day. As a matter of fact, I might just leave it at that. Let's leave that as the final conversation. I just want to say thank you to all the team that's brought this camp together, everybody for taking the time out of this day to come and share and listen, and of course thank you to all the speakers. It's been an amazing and perfectly aligned row of speakers, and thank you for letting me do my thing. There is no timer, but share with your group. What are you going to do to share these principles when you get back to that other thing we call the real world? Have an amazing burn, guys. Much love. Talk, share. Just make that statement, guys. Make that statement. Talk to the people in your group of three. Don't get up until you've had that, and then go do your thing.
We got 3 big barrels of cocktails in the bars. We got a margarita, gin and tonic, vodka soda. Get it in there, it's cold.
Thank you.